Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The State Board will come back to order. Ms. Cordial, would you please call the roll?
Board Member Durham.
Here.
Board Member Goff.
Here.
Sorry, Board Member Flores.
Here.
And also Board Member Goff, thank you.
Here.
Board Member McClellan.
Here.
Board Member Rankin.
Here.
Board Member Shuffle.
Here.
And Board Member Schroeder.
Here.
Thank you.
Board Member Schaffel, would you lead us in the pledge this morning?
Will.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item is the approval of the agenda. Let me first say a couple of things. One, sorry we're late. It is not Dr. Scheffel's fault. It is just that we've just been sort of scrambling around with a very heavy agenda and maybe making a few changes and slightly reorganizing. So before I ask for a motion to approve the agenda, I would like to clarify the order of how motions and presentations are made for action items. And I want to thank Ms. Cordial and Board Member Goff for helping clarify this for us. First, we'll ask staff to make a presentation, and then before we begin our board discussions, we will make the motions, rather than throwing the motions out before we even have a presentation. It makes a lot more sense. So is there a motion, please, to approve the agenda? Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So that's approved. The next item is the consent agenda. And again, we're going to make a slight change here today. Before we move to take on the consent agenda, I'd like to ask Bill Kotzstetter to please come forward and speak on the charter waivers. A number of us had some questions, and it might help us as we're deciding what items to pull if we have a little bit of clarifying information.
All right, thank you. Good
Welcome.
morning.
Good morning.
Today you have a lot of charter agenda items. This is usual this time of year when either new schools are finalizing contracts or charter renewals typically happen this time of year. Our office reviewed the renewals and applications on today's agenda. Most were pretty typical with common waiver requests and replacement plans. Most are scheduled for consent at this time because the waivers and replacement plans were pretty typical. The last two are scheduled for a vote based on agenda discussion with the chair and the vice chair. For these two, most of the waivers are typical, but a couple were identified for possible discussion. I will provide updates on those two agenda items later in the day. You'll notice that there are a handful of charter agenda items where the waiver request was from a network, and a couple of questions came in about networks. I wanted to clarify that the waiver requests are still for individual schools and not for all the schools that are a part of the network. You can see the individual schools listed, identified in the public content section of the board items. Currently, under the Charter Schools Act, even if a request is submitted by a network, the board still grants waivers to individual schools. We also received a question about new and renewal charter schools. For a new charter school, the waiver request is part of an initial signed charter contract with the district. So when that first contract is signed, the request comes to our office. When a contract is about to expire, a school and a district go through a renewal process. As part of a renewal, the charter school and the authorizer sign an updated contract. The waivers in the contract then have to be approved by the state board, even if they are the same waivers from the original contract. There was also a question about charter terms. A typical charter term is for 5 years. Sometimes a term may be shorter, and typically that's because of stricter performance monitoring put in place by the authorizer. So they may renew a charter school for 1, 2, 3, 5, depending on the decision of the local authorizer. Sometimes we have seen longer terms. For example, a couple of months ago, you saw a 30-year term. And typically, a 30-year term would only be signed in the hopes of supporting a charter school with facility finance plans. But those contracts would still have provisions in place for the authorizer to have more frequent review. State law also requires districts to annually review a charter's academic and financial performance. So even with a 30-year contract, the authorizer still has mechanisms in place to hold schools accountable for their performance on an annual basis. That said, for the charters on today's agenda, all have contract terms between 1 and 5 years, so within the typical range. Those are all my updates for this morning, but I wanted to see if you have any questions before you move forward.
Thank you very much. That's really a helpful update. Questions before we go? Board Member Rankin.
I just have one. When you said the charter has to be reviewed in 5 years, does that mean the waivers too? Or are you just talking about the waivers?
So when the authorizer and the charter sign that initial contract, the contract will specify the length or the term of the contract. So it may be 1 year, it may be 5 years. But if it comes due in 5 years, then when they renew the contract, it would come to the board for a vote, even if there are no changes to the contract. It would just say this is a new contract with a new expiration, but the waivers would have to be approved.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So I have a request, I think, based on the questions that came up for at least Board Member Rankin and me, which is that in the introduction letter, or memo rather, that you all prepare for us, would you be good enough to include somewhere real obviously whether it is a renewal or
Okay.
not? I find that helpful. The length of the contract, I mean, we can find all this by hunting, but I think that's what we do, and it would be helpful for us to know which ones we want to spend more time hunting on,
Okay.
which ones not. Finally, I think we'd like to know whether the school's on the clock or not.
Okay.
Any other items that would be helpful for you all? As we expect that this may come up again. We have certain periods when we have a gazillion charter pieces, and to the extent that we can not be pulling things off, it would be helpful. Board Member Flores.
The RE, if that could be really bold,
Microphone.
Okay.
that would really be helpful.
Make RE really bold.
Yes.
Okay.
Whole, proposal, final written determination concerning Martinez Elementary.
Okay. Great.
Thank you. Appreciate this very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Where am I? I'm in the wrong place. So I'd like to ask someone to,
Bill's mic is up in the air. I'm trying to, yeah. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
it's okay.
Forgive me.
Do I have a motion for the consent agenda, please?
I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Do you want to read it? Yeah. The answer to that is no.
Fell right into it.
I move to place the following matters on the consent agenda. 1502 regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning a license and authorization, charge number 2012 EC 1967, direct department staff and the State Attorney General's office to prepare the documents necessary to request a formal hearing for the revocation of the credential holder's license and authorization pursuant to Section 24-4-104 Colorado Revised Statutes. 15.03 regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning a license, charge number 2016 EC 434, direct department staff and State Attorney General's office to prepare the documents necessary to request a formal hearing for the revocation of the credential holder's license pursuant to Section 24-4-104 CRS. 15.05 regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning a license, charge number 2017 EC 1228, direct department staff and State Attorney General's office to prepare the documents necessary to request a formal hearing for the revocation of the credential holder's license pursuant to Section 24-4-104 CRS. 15.06 regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning a license, charge number 2018 EC 133, issue on order of summary suspension of the credential holder's teacher's license by directing the chair of the state board to sign the order. 15.07, approve the 4 initial emergency authorization requests as set forth in the published agenda. 15.08, approve Eagle Rock School and Professional Development Center's request for an amendment to their alternative education preparation program as set forth in the published agenda. 15.09, approve Friends Schools' request for an amendment to their alternative education preparation program as set forth in the published agenda. 15.10, approve Metropolitan State University of Denver's request for an amendment to their alternative education preparation program as set forth in the published agenda. 15.11, approve Western State Colorado University's request for an amendment to their alternative educator preparation program as set forth in the published agenda. 16.01, approve the expenditure of up to $105,000 from Mary Jones Trust Fund for the Talking Book Library. 16.02, approve the application for credit certification of a multi-district online school submitted by West End RE2 School District on behalf of Colorado Online Academy. 16.03-16.21, approve the charter waiver request action, items 16.03 through 16.21 inclusive, as set forth in the published agenda. This is the end of the consent agenda.
Thank you. That's a proper motion. Do I have a second? Can't shake your head. You just I appreciate the effort, but it's got to be recorded. Thank you. Board members, are there any items you'd like to pull from the agenda? Board Member Durham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to remove from the consent agenda item 16.02.
Okay. Any others? Let's see, before we vote, I guess I have a question on some of them, but we will pull that. And I have questions about 15.08 through 15.11. Thank you. I'm wondering just exactly why that request. Actually, I'm also wondering why Western State and Metro have alternative ed prep programs, because I thought they were ed prep preparers. So I'm all confused, and I just want to be clear on what we're voting on, please.
Thank you, Dr. Schroeder. There are 4 alternative educator. Thank you. I'm no longer Bill Cottonsteady.
You didn't look like him anyway.
I didn't look like Bill anyway, so I'm Colleen O'Neill. There are 4 alternative educator preparation programs that have come forward this board meeting to get approved to provide alternative preparation licensures to non-public school employees. So to private school employees. This is something that we did approve as a Board of Education, a charter or a alternative preparation program, the Colorado Christian University alternative preparation program several months ago. In statute, it does not explicitly call out non-public entities as someone who can participate in alternative preparation.
Oh, okay.
So it's a statute, it's an amendment so that we can allow it. It does not specifically prohibit it either, but it does not specifically call out that non-public entities can be alternative educators in that instance. Okay. So this is opening that door just a little tiny bit more to alternative preparation candidates and more.
So we can anticipate there may be some others as well.
I would anticipate so because folks are trying to serve and kind of increase our licensed educator population across the state.
Okay.
And I think you asked another question, Dr. Schroeder, around why are 2 of our institutes of higher education, and we have a few more of our institutes of higher education. They offer 2 pathways trying to meet the needs of individuals in the field. So the alternative pathway, several institutes of higher education offer the 4-year traditional program, and then they also offer alternative programs that are within a year to meet the needs of bachelor degreed individuals.
Okay.
And offer more opportunities for
and then
licensed
they work
educators.
in cooperation with school districts.
They do.
Okay,
School districts, BOCES are BOCES organizations as well.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Anything else anyone wants to pull? So we've pulled one item, 16.02. Are there any objections to the consent agenda? Thank you. We'll look at 16.02 probably at the end of the day tomorrow. Does that work?
Fine.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is a report from the Director of Board Relations. Ms. Cordial, what do you have for us today, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Commissioner Andes, and welcome back, Board Member Sheppel. We're so excited to have you. I would like to just start off with my few reminders that we are video streaming the board meeting. Folks are able to find the video streaming link on the State Board of Education webpage. And then my other friendly reminder to board members and presenters to please speak clearly into your microphones. For those of you needing to connect to CDE's guest wireless, locate the CDE hotspot. The password is still silver, capital S. In your board packets, you have the following. The quick glance expense report in your events calendar. There aren't any major events that I have to highlight this month.
AERA?
Oh, AERA, yes. Is that in April?
In April.
Yes. No, that's okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. Also in your board packets and or available on board docs are the following materials for Wednesday, March 14th. For item 10.02, you have House Bill 1269 concerning the parent notification for student safety and protection, as well as a fact sheet on that bill. For item 11.01, you have a memo regarding the proposed final written determination concerning Martinez Elementary School and a copy of that final determination. For item 13.01, you have a memo regarding the rulemaking hearing for the rules for the administration of the accreditation of school districts, 1 CCR 301-1, red line and clean copy of those rules, the rules to statute crosswalk, and the response to written comments document. For item 14.01, you have a memo regarding the standards revision process, the accompanying PowerPoint, and an overview of the final recommendations for the art standards, as well as the final recommended versions for the art standards. You also have the standards review and revision process document, the State Board standards review and revision schedule, as well as the board's proposed amendment document. For item 15.07, you have a memo regarding the 4 requests for initial emergency authorizations. For item 15.08, you have a memo regarding Eagle Rock School and Professional Development Center's request for an amendment to their alternative educator preparation program. For item 15.09, you have a memo regarding Friends School's request for an amendment to their alternative educator preparation program. For item 15.10, you have a memo regarding Metropolitan State University of Denver's request for an amendment to their alternative educator preparation program. And for 15.11, you have a memo regarding Western State Colorado University's request for an amendment to their educator preparation program. For item 16.01, you have a memo regarding the request from the Colorado Talking Book Library for expenditures from the Mary Jones Trust Fund. For item 16.02, you have a memo regarding West End School District's request for certification of a multi-district online school. For items 16.03 through 16.23, you have memos and supporting materials for the charter waiver requests. For item 17.01, you have a memo regarding the Year 7 schools and districts progress monitoring, the accompanying PowerPoint, and summaries of the progress monitoring for those schools and districts. For Thursday, March 15th, you have, for item 3.01, a memo regarding the standards review and revision process, the accompanying PowerPoint for tomorrow, overviews of the final recommendations for computer science and world languages standards, the proposed standards for computer science, and the final recommended revisions to the world languages standards. For item 4.01, you have a memo regarding Credo's research request, their accompanying PowerPoint, a summary of each study submitted, the executive summaries of prior research, Credo's institutional review board approval documentation, and the board-approved research review process overview. For item 6.01, you have a memo regarding the rules for the Colorado Educator Licensing Act 1991, 1 CCR 301-37, the accompanying PowerPoint, a red line and clean copy of those rules, and rules to statute crosswalk. For item 6.02, you have a memo regarding the rules for the educator licensure endorsements, 1 CCR 301-101, and those proposed rules. And for item 6.03, you have a memo regarding the rules for the statewide system to evaluate the effectiveness of licensed personnel, 1 CCR 301-37, a red line and clean copy of those rules, and the rules to statute crosswalk. That concludes the materials you have for March. Thank you.
Now take a breath.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is Board Member Durham.
In looking at the budget report which accompanies this report, it looks like the board has been very thrifty and will likely have unexpended funds at the end of the year. And I wonder if it might be possible to suggest that this room needs its lighting upgraded a little bit. And I'd like to say the fact I can't see when I'm here is not due to age, but due to technological issues. And I would wonder if we might be able to look at and being able to do a capital improvement in this room, because I think this lighting is outdated, and certainly after a couple of days here, I seem to have a headache, and I'm going to attribute
It's
it
not
to the
good.
lighting, not the company, so.
It's a wavering thing.
Yeah.
So I just would throw that out as a suggestion. I don't think we are likely to expend all the funds.
Right. I had the same thought, Board Member Durham. However, we've not discussed whether we're going to hit the road this summer in a board meeting. And I don't really know that that would make a significant dent in our resources, but I think both of those items probably are worth a discussion on the part of the board.
I thought we were
Board
going to
Member Flores.
Durango. I thought we were going to Durango.
How did you think that?
I thought we discussed it. Didn't we discuss it?
You have good dreams, so be sure to share them with us, but I don't recall that discussion. Do you
Oh,
all?
maybe I don't. I put Durango forward, maybe.
It's a good idea.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
No, Board Member Durham, I do appreciate that.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it up because we're
The
getting
lighting
near
is
the.
really, really old and not good for probably any of us. We might be shocked were we to investigate the cost thereof, but
Yeah.
let's do that. Could we do that?
Yeah, it may be unaffordable. If it is, it is, and that's fine.
Well, or it may be more than 1 year
Yeah.
that we do that. We need to do it in increments. I don't disagree at all. Board Member Goff?
Thank you.
But that
Are you,
shouldn't.
Steve, I left my copy of that at home, if it's the board expense distribution. Do we have any expected proper use of those funds?
My conference
Is there
gonna be
anything that
expensive.
outlines how expenses are supposed to be used that's in that amount, in that pot of money?
Typically, what we've done is if there are leftover expenditures in the state board office budget, we use those funds to make small renovations to the boardroom, or for laptops, or anything that board members or the office may need.
I realize that, but have we ever taken the actual 7-person board line item allotments and spent them on equipment and materials?
Yes.
Or is
Oh,
that-
yes.
I did
Yes.
last year,
Yes.
Yes.
we
and I
have.
certainly will this year again.
That's part
That
of what
wasn't her
we've
question.
used with what's remaining.
Okay.
Board Member Rankin?
I think this is a discussion we should have at a later date, possibly when we know whether or not we're going to have excess funds. I think we might be putting the cart before the horse here.
Right. Although the discussion regarding having a board meeting in another part of the state, we probably don't want to put off too long, because that's either in June or September, August. Right.
Durango would be
I appreciate your Durango dream. We probably want to go to alternative
well, it would be better.
alternative congressional
in
districts.
June.
And I believe probably Mr. Durham's district might be next, but Denver, we've got, CD1, we've got covered. Board Member McClellan.
In anticipation of a possible conversation, maybe we want to give staff just a heads up that an estimate of what it would cost to make an improvement in the lighting here would be helpful, so
Yeah.
that when we're ready,
Yeah.
they're ready too.
I have found it actually difficult in my own personal remodeling efforts to find consultants who can make recommendations based on adequate lighting, what is adequate, et cetera. So this might be a project when you don't have anything else to do.
Oh, perfect.
Ms. Cordial, to investigate, but it actually does take some time.
Okay.
So that'd be great.
This is awful. What it does this.
All right, do we need a 2-minute close our eyes or not? No,
It's fluorescent.
it is fluorescent. Next, are we finished? Thank you. Next item on our agenda is an update from Commissioner Anthus. Commissioner?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I hope that you all, I have not been, maybe we can attribute this meeting to daylight savings change and our tiredness. I've always wondered why I can move time zones when I travel and not be as affected, but somehow when the clock moves an hour here, I'm somehow very affected. So hopefully we'll all stay energized and awake today. First, I just wanted to welcome Dr. Scheffel back. Thank you so much. Wonderful to see you. We've spent some time with Dr. Scheffel last week, just reacclimatizing her to the board, and are just appreciative of her expertise and knowledge on these issues and her dedication to public service. So thank you. Welcome back. And then it was, when I do these reports, it does, it makes me realize how busy we all are. So I did get the opportunity, it's always great when I get to visit schools, and I did get the opportunity to visit Summit Elementary School in Woodland Park to present them with their Title I Distinguished School Award. And that was wonderful. It was a full school-wide assembly at an elementary school there, and it was really great. And I got to do a tour with the principal and pop into some classrooms, and their work is really exceptional there. I also was the keynote speaker at the iLearn conference on personalized and blended learning work, and I know that that's an area of interest you all have in terms of thinking through how we best do online blended learning and that work, and how you think about that to support students. And so that was a really good conference. I also went to a K through 12 and higher education focused meeting with my counterpart at the Department of Higher Education, Dr. Kim Hunter-Reid, to talk a little bit about how we continue to blur the lines between K through 12 and higher education, and how we think about those important elements of concurrent enrollment, early college, high schools, all of those pieces. And that was a really interesting meeting and informative meeting. I will say our CDE staff have been hard at work as well. Each year we need to review the schools and districts' unified improvement plans that are on priority improvement or turnaround. And so our staff just completed over somewhere between 180 and 200 unified improvement plan review processes. And so that's, we give detailed feedback back to schools and districts around supporting them in their improvement plan. We also did, and Board Member Goff represented the board very well at the state and district award ceremony. We did this at the Denver Art Museum to have a big enough venue for all the schools. We have seen more and more schools getting awards, which I think is good. We had 178 schools with a John Irwin Award this year. We had eight high school academic growth awards. We had 54 Centers of Excellence awards. We had 126 Governor's Distinguished Improvement Awards. We had 5 Blue Ribbon schools awarded and 2 Title I Distinguished Schools awarded. So that was a really wonderful event to celebrate the good work that is going on in our schools and district. I had another teacher's cabinet meeting, so we've talked about my teacher's cabinet, and we had a full day-long meeting with the teacher's cabinet, and we actually used that time to talk about the Education Leadership Council work and have them give some input into that work. And so we did some design work around what the education of the future would look like from their perspective, and that was really excellent. And then I attended with a few of my team members the Council for Chief State School Officers Conference in DC, and actually also did a presentation with the superintendent in Greeley around how we work with our schools and districts on turnaround in partnership. And so I think that presentation went over really well. And then lastly, visited the Santa Fe BOCES and the Southeast BOCES, and also visited the Granada School District. So trying to get around to all of our districts around the state, and Granada's a very small little district east of Lamar, I believe. I hope I got that right. Very small, but it was wonderful to see the students. The students actually run a small museum in the community, and they do everything about it. They do all the staffing, all the tour guide, all the historical updates for it. They do all the research. It was very impressive. And so I got a full tour of their museum, and it was very exciting. So that was my month last month.
That's great. Do you ever get lost?
Yes, I do. And that's why I try not to do too many phone calls when I'm driving.
Great, thank you very much. The next item is board member reports. I'd like to start maybe down here, Board Member Goff. Do you have a report to make?
Well, let me see if I can find where the starting point is. Overall, pretty focused on our legislative discussions and activities, and I have to say I think we've done a good job this session of keeping ourselves informed and talking things out as thoroughly but efficiently as we possibly have been able to. We had an experience on Monday, which I'm sure I won't go into details. We'll do that later in our legislative update discussions. I also have been paying attention to legislation at the federal level, and there are some things that we can expect to have happen sometime, but no one is any more certain about timelines for things such as the federal education budget and the processes and mechanics around that happening. It will eventually, we'll probably be talking about that. I have enjoyed the opportunity to spend time with our groups, our constituency groups, and Dr. Anthus mentioned the awards ceremony. That's always such a refreshing, uplifting experience, and I know that the schools that are recognized and the districts as well are very appreciative of the opportunity to have their moment in the sun, so to speak. And I think that's something that is good for us to be doing, along with the staff members who work equally hard as the schools are to recognize those successes. I've also been following along some of the things that are going on in certain districts in my district. And, you know, people are working very hard, and they are displaying a lot of spirit around innovation, new ways of looking at solution finding, working with each other, creating some common approaches that everybody can find a place to contribute into. And I think that we've got some good things going in our school districts, and I'm hoping that the rest of this spring and throughout the summer and looking ahead to next year, that continues to be the case. I also, just one last event that I was able to attend was a gathering of Teach Plus. It's teachers who are a part of a group that is working on developing their own leadership skills, but also becoming more aware, involved in, and understanding of the policy conversations. So we have seen, we've seen what I believe is a really healthy uptick in teacher access to talking with policymakers such as us about ideas that they have, and being on the ground and doing the work themselves every day. I certainly have no bias whatsoever, but I believe those folks are very well equipped to contribute to our conversations about how we go about things. So,
Thank you. Board Member Sheffield, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Just briefly to say thank you for the opportunity to be back on the board. I know there's a lot of work to do this spring. I look forward to being a part of it. I'll seek a full term in November, so I look forward to preparing for that. And I just appreciate the opportunity to work together with all of you on these initiatives.
Great, thank you. Board Member McClellan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to say how much I appreciated being able to attend part of the CASB conference here in Denver. That was worthwhile and very fruitful. I had an opportunity to sit at tables with board members from a number of the school districts that are part of the 6th Congressional District, so that was a great opportunity. I also had an opportunity throughout the last month to talk with constituents in Adams County, Arapahoe County, and Douglas County, and that was helpful as always. I wanted to say a special thanks to our legislative liaisons for doing the hard work of keeping us up to date with the changes in various bills across the street. And I also wanted to thank Ms. Mello for her efforts in answering any questions that I have had along the way in the process. And I also appreciate the opportunity to have met with Dr. Colsman over the last month to talk through questions that I had about the process for academic standards updating. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Rankin.
Welcome, Dr. Shuffle, again to the board, back to the board. Pivot to the positive. This is the slogan that Superintendent Dave Ulrich from Moffat County School District uses. He's incorporating Project Lead the Way into his district. It's a really an exciting program for them and engages students in various STEM-related activities. Project Lead the Way has programs in 50 states with 10 in Colorado elementary schools that are currently involved. Moffat had to close an elementary school this year and allowed them to use, they're using some of the savings from closing that school to implement this program throughout the district. Strategic plan and supportive board and dedication of the teachers will lead the students into this program. It's really exciting, and I commend Superintendent Ulrich for what he's doing, Pivot to the Positive. I can't help but address the issue of school safety and how it has come to the surface in the last few weeks, and also the uniqueness of our state and our school districts for trying to understand how to address this problem. In the 3rd Congressional District, I had an opportunity to meet with Sheriff Garrett Williams from Routt County. He has a plan that'll put a school marshal in all 13 public schools in Routt County. He's opening up the possibility of doing this to the citizens of the county for solutions, and it'll include a desire for everyone to raise their taxes in order to pay for these trained marshals. I spoke to him and shared the fact that I know a small school district that uses concealed carry for the teachers that already have concealed carry and are very good with guns, and how that is helping their school cope with this. They do keep their guns in a safe, except for the superintendent who carries all the time. Very small school district. They could not afford the program that Sheriff Garrett Williams is putting into effect. Not all teachers are part of this program, just those that want to be. And the superintendent assured me that those teachers and the superintendent go out to the range twice a month to practice, every month. I shared this with Garrett Williams. He said, even my people don't go out that much. So to show you the unique opportunities we have in rural districts, the ones I represent, I think the communities are addressing this, and I think we have a lot to learn from what they're doing. I just wanted to share this. Every district is uniquely different in Colorado. I also had an opportunity to meet with Judy Perez of iLearn Collaborative. I went to a dinner. The core of their work is to help educators reach their full potential by providing professional development training for educators by educators on technology-enabled, student-centered learning. Wonderful program she has, and very excited people. There were 2 people attending the dinner from countries in Europe because they had heard about this program and they want to implement it in their countries. February 28th was IDD Day at the Capitol. This is Intellectual Developmental Disabilities. They had a luncheon at McNichols Building. Each year, the organization gives a Legislator of the Year award, and I'm proud to announce that in 1917, Representative Bob Rankin from District 57 won this award. And on the next year, that legislator addresses their lunch here at the Capitol. On February 28th, he addressed 500 IDD supporters from around the state, and it was a very exciting day at the Capitol. And that's my CD3 report.
Thank you. And congratulations to Representative Rank. It's great. Board Member Flores.
Yes, thank you. I attended the CASB Conference on Choice, and I found that interesting. I know, too, that well, also I was glad that I was able to meet with other board members in the state, and especially board members, you know, in my area as well. I had an interesting meeting with parents and students at Lincoln High School, which is in Denver, in the southwest area of Denver, and many of these parents were concerned about conjoining schools. Lincoln happens to be one of these schools that's conjoined. I think there are 3 schools within this one school, and they don't find that you know, brings some problems. First of all, on the second floor of the building, they just kind of cut it off, and that makes it, I thought, kind of difficult if there's a fire, and especially when there's several floors and several schools. Some of the students felt that you know, looking at Jell-O and pudding and chocolate pudding fights was not what they had gone to high school for, and apparently that happens, you know, in the junior high school, and especially in the auditorium. I guess they go and hide and then have their pudding and Jell-O fights in the high school. Well, I guess these very older sounding high school students didn't find that very enlightening. Also, one of the other concerns that the parents had was the Denver Public Schools SPF. They, first of all, thought they could just try and get rid of the SPF, and I tried to tell them that that was not something that, you know, they could do. They might be able to work with Denver Public Schools and trying to align it better, but to, you know, some of their concerns, but the SPF kind of came from above, and we could not really get rid of that. I also spoke with several individuals about the monies needed for education. I've been going around with a list so that parents can put their name down. It's the superintendents also spoke about the monies that they need during the CASB conference, and there's an organization that also has asked several of us to kind of take a list and get parent signatures for that. So I've been taking that around with me during the meetings that I have. Thank you. That's all I have for today.
Thank you. Board Member Durham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just would observe, Dr. Flores, I think that's a terrible waste of good chocolate pudding, but I have some other suggestions. I had the opportunity this past month to have dinner with a couple of the board members from Lewis Palmer School District 38 in Colorado Springs, or in El Paso County, and it was a good learning experience for me about the operations of local school boards. Had a chance for a conversation with the superintendent in Colorado Springs about how he handles choice in to the school district and open enrollments and the function of their lottery program to allocate choice in spots. And then finally I had Ms. Goff and I testified on House Bill 1222 on Monday, and pleased to report that that bill was killed by a vote of 12-0. So
Good job.
I think Ms. Groff must have been very persuasive in her efforts, and appreciate the teamwork on that. And then did have an opportunity to visit a couple of high schools in another state informally, and did have an opportunity just to view their external security measures, which were quite impressive, and I think something I want to take an opportunity here in the near future to compare with some of our in-district schools on security, just to see if there are any significant differences with the schools here. So, thank you.
Thank you. Just try to be brief. I also attended the Rose Foundation's presentation for Teach Plus. I'm really pleased that Colorado has a chapter. This provides teachers with an opportunity to enlarge their activities, and just think it helps to professionalize the profession and gives them other chances. And also to have a greater understanding of what we policy folks do. Ms. Goff and I attended the NASB conference. We had two tasks, basically. One, we've been working with the leadership there in planning the NASB conference that'll be in Colorado in October. Any input from you all certainly would be welcome. The convention had an awful lot of opportunities for us to listen to experienced folks in the DC area about how does education legislation and education funding actually happen. The most common expression being that when the president's budget arrives, that it's literally dead on arrival almost immediately, because then Congress starts working on it. I thought that's kind of discouraging, but it's, I believe, the way it's always been. But there were some interesting insights in that area. I also attended a session on the teacher shortage and heard pretty much the same thing that I keep hearing, which is technically there is not a shortage. We are still in this country producing actually more teachers than we need. The problem is that they're not in the areas where we have the shortages, and they don't live in the areas or don't want to work in the areas where we have the shortages. And so policy changes probably need to focus a little bit more on that than just increasing the number of candidates. It's a little bit discouraging, I think, because I think it's going to be a whole lot harder to target particular areas and particular topics than just increasing the pipeline. Monday, I attended a presentation at the Gates Foundation. They invited Eva Moskowitz from New York to speak about, I think mostly her book, but to speak about establishing her charter schools in New York. And it reminded me, state by state, how different the process is, the opportunities are, and to some extent how different the schools are. One of the things that I remember is that she said she's been sued, I believe, 25 times. She's never lost a lawsuit, but she's been sued that often. I'm not aware of charter operators being sued on a regular basis.
Well, she
But-
does. I'm sorry.
So it was interesting, and I think our opportunities in Colorado are a whole lot more helpful than they have been in New York. I also attended the conference, the CASB conference. I would just argue that it was great that they took on the topic of choice this time, simply because school board members are, for the most part, the authorizers of our charter schools. I think that discussion really needed to begin. I think it was just a beginning, but I find that very, very helpful. And I'm glad they did that. And then I also had meetings with administrators in my school and school board members in my district. So I think that's all. The next item, boy, we are right on time. Holy moly.
Why she gets sued?
No, well, that's a
It's really
social
interesting.
conversation.
It's
She
not
wins,
social.
she wins all her lawsuits, so it's probably not that
Yeah.
helpful. So we'll now hold our morning public comment. Each individual is limited to 3 minutes, and Ms. Cordial will let you know when your time is up. And I need a list. Sorry?
Just Mr. Walker.
Okay. Mr. Walker, welcome back.
Thank you. Welcome back, Dr. Shuffle.
Thank you.
Glad to see you, and all the board members. Co-chair Rankin mentioned something about the sheriffs and what's happening on school safety. And I think since it's almost exactly 10 o'clock, I think we should all be reminded that many of our students, elementary schools, I suppose, certainly high schools, colleges all over this nation, at 10 o'clock are walking out of their classes. Many of them, not all of them. And they're going to take 17 minutes. And last board member, this board had a moment of silence. And it's an issue that affects me, and I've been on talk radio, conservative talk radio, by the way. If I were teaching in some of the rural areas of Connecticut that I did years ago, I would take the training and I would have some sort of weapon. And one of the surprising things that I've gotten back as a result of the statements is some of my black friends have said very clearly that they don't quite trust the people that would be armed not to use the arms, or not use the arms directly, but to use it as an undue force on students of color. With my light skin color, I didn't pick that up. I didn't pick that up. I wasn't that sensitive. But I know if I were teaching in East Hampton, Connecticut, Warrenville, Connecticut, Colchester, Connecticut again, I would have some arms. If I were teaching at the Eastern Connecticut State University Normal School, half a block away from the police station, I wouldn't be armed. If I were teaching at the laboratory school, the University of Connecticut, almost on campus, I wouldn't be armed. But if I were in a rural school, I would. And some of my friends said, George, you're in your 80s and your macho side is coming out. But I can't think of anything worse. And I don't want to cry, and I did when I was on talk radio. That assistant coach who put his body between that shooter, that deranged shooter, almost a teenager himself, unbelievable, and one of his students. I said, I wonder if his last thought was, I wish I had a weapon. And I said that on the radio. And someone corrected me and said, I hope that man, his last words were, God have mercy on his soul. So there's different ways to look at that issue. There's different ways to look at that issue. God have mercy on his soul.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Ms. Mello, I'm wondering if you would allow us a 10-minute break, or if that messes up the work that you're doing across the street. It's already been a bit of a long morning. Thank you. 10 minutes, colleagues?
Yes.
Please. on the 2018 legislative session. Welcome, Ms. Mello. I will turn this over to you.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Is that on?
Get a little closer.
I always feel like I have to eat this thing in order for
Correct.
it to function.
You do.
Okay. Good morning. It's nice to see you all again. Saw you about an hour ago. So we are officially halfway through the legislative session. I think most people consider that to be good news. I certainly do. I know all of the staff do. We have one bill for you all to decide upon today, to take a vote on, and so I thought we would start with that. It is House Bill, and I have sent you all a bunch of information about this, so you should have all this background information that I'm working off of right now. House Bill 1269, Parent Notice for Student Safety and Protection. It's being brought by Representative Paul Undine and Brittany Patterson and Senators Rhonda Field and Owen Hill, so it's bipartisan. The history of this is actually very deeply related to the State Board and an action that I will do my best to describe, but those of you who are here probably could describe it better than I can. Several years ago, that the State Board took some action and promulgated rules around when districts had to notify parents of certain arrests or charges against school personnel. Through the rule review process that's in place, they decided that you all didn't have the statutory authority to promulgate that rule, so the rule went away. I'm sure that's not the technical term for it, but that's essentially what happened. And this bill is in some ways a replacement. Now, it's not identical, but it's certainly trying to get at least at the same concerns I think that the board tried to address several years ago. So, and the other thing I would just emphasize is this bill has been very heavily negotiated. There's a reason it's being introduced 2 months into the session, not the first week of session. It's a challenging topic, and there are important issues kind of on both sides and from lots of different perspectives. And I'm not aware that other organizations have taken a position on the bill yet, so I don't want to in any way make it sound like I'm telling you what somebody else's position is. But I will tell you that CASE and CASB and CEA were very involved in the negotiations around the bill. So they've all had input on it. They obviously, as organizations, will determine their own position. Okay, so that's a lot of background. Basically what the bill says is that districts must notify, and when I say districts, that's shorthand for Districts and Charter School Institute and LEPs and anyone who is essentially one of those entities. But districts must notify parents of charges brought against an employee who has contact with students, so that's an important modification. If the charges are for one of the offenses that require you all, as a state board, to either deny, revoke, or suspend a license. So I want to just stop there because it gets a little bit confusing. So you all have the authority to deny, revoke, suspend educator licenses and if certain offenses are committed. Whether someone is an educator or not under this bill, if they have contact with students, the standard is still the same standard that you all would use in terms of disciplining educators. It was, I think, a way of showing deference to the State Board, but also trying to have some consistency and predictability for teachers and for everybody else to understand what the rules are. So basically, if you are arrested for something that would get your license in trouble, the district is required to notify parents of what's going on. The district is also required to go back and notify parents if the charges are dropped or if there's some resolution, which I think is an important modification to the bill as well, right? Because just because in our system, just because someone's accused doesn't necessarily mean that they did it or that, they're going to go through the judicial system for it. So if charges are dropped, there is a process in place to require districts to notify that as well. That is really the essence of the bill. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I think both your legislative contacts, Jane and Steve, are recommending a support position, and I don't know if Board Member Goff wants to add anything.
Thank you, Jennifer. No, you did a good job putting that all together. I have talked with Representative Lundin about this. We both have, and I would say for me, the one notable difference this time around versus last time around is the It's pretty explicit within the language that there needs to be notification if someone's charges are dismissed. There has to be a notification of what the disposition of this was, no matter what. And I recall that we had a long discussion about that topic last time, and there was a pretty firm statement made by the teachers' associations that the whole idea of make sure we've got in there innocent before proven guilt. Innocent before guilty. I didn't turn that around. But that was a big point of this. It's also narrower. It kind of brings it down. It funnels it into a little bit simpler, more refined way to explain it and list whatever charges are involved in this particular thing. It's timely. There have been some things recently that have caused some unease, if nothing else, around the state, and I think this is a good, healthy way of handling it, and we'll see how it goes. So.
Comments, questions? I think I would make the comment that there are a number of districts that have policies that align with this, so it's not necessarily going to be new everywhere, but in some districts, they don't have the policy, or they have the policy and have not been cautious enough to carry it out. So it's not as though there's been a wholesale effort to hide things from parents, but it's not been sufficiently consistent. So I definitely agree with it. Board Member Rankin?
I would like to have Ms. Tolleson comment on this. This is very concerning to me in the bill summary, where it says, if it's, no, I'm sorry, it's in the bill, alleged criminal conduct. Boy, that alleged bothers me a lot, because it's so easy for a he said or she said accusation. And once that's out there, I don't care if it goes through and they say, oh, we made a mistake. The perception is very scary at that point to me. Now, how can we resolve that how can you make me feel better about this when the word alleged is used there?
It's a good question, Board Member Rankin, members of the board. One of the things that I do think that this proposal does that provides a level of protection against what you've talked about, that's narrower than the old set of rules was, is it's not triggered merely by arrest. You know, there's sort of there's this idea that, you know, you've been arrested for domestic violence. But really, this is tied to charging, and then it defines charged as the formal charging process, where for a felony, for example, they would have either had or have waived their right to a preliminary hearing where there's a probable cause determination. So it provides that it's gone to the point where it's not just an arrest by law enforcement saying, I'm going to charge you with X, but it's gone to been vetted at the district attorney's office and been filed as formal charges. Usually then, by that point, there's also been a judicial signature of a probable cause finding on an arrest warrant. So it's got a level of, buried in that sort of hyper-technical gobbledygook, a level of protection against the sort of mere allegation that you're concerned about. Well, yes, go ahead.
And I'm looking backward for the last week about what has gone on at the Capitol, and the words more likely than not have come up. That to me is not strong enough for what this bill should be. Do you feel this bill is stronger than that?
Well, that is the standard for criminal charges to move forward, not for somebody to be convicted. You know, that's beyond a reasonable doubt that we've all sort of learned over the years. But the more probable than not is another way of phrasing probable cause. So that is the standard that's used for somebody at least to be held to account as criminally charged.
So we have that. We do have the charge with this bill?
Yes, it is tied to charged and defines charge in terms of that formal court process, not just an arrest.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, may I just add? I think that is a question the sponsors really tried to be thoughtful about, and another way in which they tried to address that is being very clear about the types of offenses that this applies to are fairly serious ones. I mean, it's not. That is their effort, and whether they've done that sufficiently or not is obviously, a judgment call that you can make. But I think they've at least attempted to ensure that this is tied to things that there's a nexus between things that would be dangerous for kids. Frankly, it's not just anything. It's not. I can't think of a great example right now. It's not bribery, which I think would be hard to argue would be connected to kids. So that's an attempt. Whether it suffices for you or not, I don't know. But
Board Member Flores.
Well, I had a colleague who was in a protest, and these were a lot of congressionalists of the Friends, and they were against capital murder. And this teacher, who was a teacher in my school, got caught up in that and was arrested. It's kind of hard. You have to think about that and arrested. Not causing malice, but was arrested. So arrested could be a reason for the school announcing that, such a person was arrested, and then kind of besmirch your character, and you'll have that for a long time. So I think schools need to be careful about that.
Madam Chair, Dr. Flores, I guess, and Julie, jump in, because I think, just to be clear, they are not required to notify upon arrest. That is not what the bill says. Okay. It is upon charge, which means, I'm going to why am I answering this question? I know nothing about the criminal justice system. Please.
Right, for it to be a formal charge, that it's gone through a level of judicial vetting, and it's been formally reviewed by the prosecutor's office. It's not just an arresting officer's sort of say so. But the other thing, and again, I'm not meaning to sound as though I'm lobbying sort of one way or the other for your position on this, but just to accurately sort of understand the facts, when it talks about must tell those parents, it's tied only to those for which revocation, disciplinary action is mandatory under state law, which is a pretty short list. Felony child abuse, a crime of violence is defined in statute, and that statute is the serious violent offenses, serious bodily injury, rape, murder, those kinds of things, okay. And sex offenses. So it's a pretty short list in terms of the mandatory. Then the other part of the bill is this permissive, sort of can report to families if it's, and that's tied back to the permissive areas in which you all can take action on licenses, which is slightly broader, some misdemeanors, misdemeanor child abuse, and so forth. So it's fairly circumscribed in terms of the kinds of offenses that you'd be talking about as well.
Okay, Board Member Rankin?
So let me ask this. We're talking about districts here. So if an incident happens at one elementary school A, and there's 20 elementary schools and whatever, does everybody in the district get the notification, or only the parents of students in elementary school A?
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, that is an excellent question. I'm going to try to pull the bill up in order to answer it, because I don't know the question off the top of my head. I believe it's restricted to the parents of children who would have contact with that individual, but let me confirm that. And maybe Julie, again.
I have another question about whether this is, well, of course, when is this going to be heard? Do we know?
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, the bill was assigned to the Judiciary Committee, and it may be in committee next week. I'll double check that. Last time I looked, it wasn't officially assigned yet, but in talking with the sponsors, they were anticipating a hearing next week.
So we could have amendments. We still have time.
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, yes. And in fact, I anticipate that there will be some amendments. The sponsors have shared with me that they have found a couple of areas that they think need some refinement. And I can certainly keep you all abreast of those developments. I will keep you abreast of those developments regardless of how you vote today.
And also, I don't know if this is where it shows up. Maybe Board Member Goff can help me with this. Could they put a sunset on this? And my reasoning is, let's say a sunset of 5 years, they review it again. That's kind of what that means. If they find the people are being alleged and that's all they remember is the allegations, we're going to be hurting a lot of teachers that don't deserve it. And that boy, I mean, that bothers me greatly. So if there was a sunset and we found that this bill, even though it has really good intent,
Right.
I'm just having trouble.
And I can certainly take that back to the sponsors. I did find the section of the statute that answers your previous question, Madam Vice Chair. So the local education provider shall provide the notification to the parents of a student enrolled in the school in which the employee is employed or was employed, with whom the local education provider has reason to believe the employee may have had contact as part of their employment, or who, in the determination of the charging criminal justice agency, should receive the notice. And I guess that's the local, sorry, I know nothing about the criminal justice system, but
No,
Julie's people, if they say that they should be notified, then they, under the bill,
I-
they get
I
notified
get
too.
it. I get it. Thank you.
I would suggest that we should ask people who have a little bit stronger knowledge, awareness of the whole sunset process. If we want to try to at least introduce the topic into a conversation, how we might go about that. Just keep it in mind as this goes through.
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, Board Member Rankin, I mean, a sunset could be put on any bill through the amendment process.
True.
And there's a variety, I mean, there's, I think, two basic ways we traditionally go about sunsets. One is you require a review, and then based on the results of that review, the legislature can decide whether to reenact or not. The other is to just say this goes away in 5 years, and if people after 5 years want it to not go away, then they have to run a bill to make it not go away. So there's kind of, those are the two basic.
How do they know it's going to go away?
So you
What's the
basically, so
process
in the
of-
bill, you write that this expires,
No. What's the notification to remind people that it might go away?
I think it falls into the there's basically school districts have a responsibility to know
track.
what the law is. So I don't think there's any sort of notification once law is sunset, at least not that I'm aware of.
To the extent that there are amendments that clarify items of question, I would certainly support that as well. I'm personally aware of an accusation against an individual by some students that were later recanted. And I've never seen that individual since. He was out in the school community serving, but so I recognize severity of false claims and the notification process. It really makes it tough. I don't think this individual was ever hired again. Nevertheless, I think our focus is on the safety of the kids, and I think that's why we're having this conversation and why this bill is here as well. Board Member Sheffel?
And is it the case that they would have to notify parents, and then let's say a new school year starts and they have to re-notify because there'd be new parents because new students might be coming in, transitioning from another grade, and then they'd have to keep a summative list and they'd have to keep re-notifying. Is there anything on timing there where you have to yearly re-notify any new parents whose students are now coming into the school? Or?
Madam Chair, Board
Doesn't
Member
make
Shuffle,
sense.
no, I don't think the bill addresses that. I mean, I think it's kind of you notify parents when a charge from the specified list of offenses has been made. You then have 2 days within the disposition of that charge to notify parents. It doesn't speak to future notifications.
I think you'd assume that that person would no longer be in the system, and so any new kids would not be exposed to that individual. I cannot imagine a district continuing to have someone on site who's been arrested and charged of these kinds of offenses.
But legally, they wouldn't have been convicted, so I'm thinking the legal rights of the individual would be in play too, right? I mean, if they were fired without being convicted, wouldn't
No, they
be-
don't have to be fired. They can be put on leave. In fact, I think that's mostly what happens, is
Leave
they're put
usually.
on leave, either paid or unpaid leave, and they don't return until
But do
it's
they have
resolved.
legal recourse if they're put on leave and they haven't been convicted?
Or somebody recants, maybe.
Generally, no. And part of it is, I mean, sort of the legal system trying to deal with imperfections of real life, right? But is to say that the presumption is if there's probable cause, we want them sort of out of the classroom or off campus. And if it turns out that they have to come back, it's the erring on the side of caution for the protection of kids is just. But in a lot of systems, they'll provide a paid leave situation so they won't take an economic hit. Doesn't mean that the public shaming or appearance of impropriety isn't still hanging over their heads.
Yeah. Board Member Rankin?
Is there a fiscal note on this at all?
I do not believe one has been published yet, but let me double check that. No, there's been no fiscal note published yet. Can I just see who's behind me? Okay, Colleen is not behind me. I believe that from a CDE perspective, this does not require additional resources because it's not a requirement
our
of the Department of
sandbox.
Ed. The way that school districts can submit information through the fiscal note process, they often don't, even if there is a fiscal impact. It's not a perfect system for getting district input into fiscal notes.
Well, you hope it doesn't happen.
Fair enough. But, so, I don't know. I don't know when the fiscal note comes out, if there will be an estimate of cost to districts or not.
Will we get,
Go ahead.
will we get a report? Let's just say this bill passes. At the end of a year, will we get a report on how many, or will we just know how many this bill has applied to in the last school year?
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, there's no reporting requirement of that nature in the bill.
Okay.
But I would defer to Ms. Tolson in terms of, because presumably these individuals are also coming to you all, most of them, maybe not all of them, but to the extent that they are licensed educators. Let's talk about a teacher, for example.
Colleen is here.
Oh, she must have been listening. You all are going to see that come through your process in terms of the laws around which you have to do for teachers' licenses. But it's probably not perfect overlap, but I would assume there's some.
There'd certainly be overlap for anybody holding an educator license. Now, recall, these are also the kinds of offenses for which, if there's arrest, the schools or districts are supposed to be notifying the department as well, and that is of mixed success. I mean, some things I know are being opened because they've hit the newspapers, but the notification is not coming from districts. And I think Dr. O'Neill has been working to increase compliance in that area.
Dr. O'Neill, do you want to come and talk to us? The question, I believe, was fiscal note, that there isn't one.
That is correct. So we don't see any additional work
Okay.
with this. All the requirements that are actually outlined in this bill really are in statute in some way or another with regard to notifying the Colorado Department of Education.
Okay.
And so there is some overlap with that as far as timing. That is probably the difference with this bill and notification to the districts, rather than the notification to the Colorado Department of Education and the Board of Education.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
More comments, questions? Please, go ahead. Don't apologize.
Are we asking for an up or down vote today? Are we supposed to give you a board vote for this? Or
Madam Chair,
can
Madam
we
Vice
do-
Chair, yes, the ledge contacts are suggesting that we vote on
Or
this today.
can we do a support, monitor, or oppose?
You always have all the options to do support, monitor, oppose. You can also take an amend position.
What?
Amend.
Okay.
Do I have a motion for House Bill 18-1269, parental notification? Board Member Goff?
I move that the State Board take a position of support on House Bill 18-1269.
Thank you. Proper motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Cordial, would you please call the roll?
Board Member Durham excused.
Is excused.
Board Member Flores.
Could I just make a counter motion and?
No, let's go through this one first. I don't think we can do a new motion till we
Well,
do.
I
Oh.
don't know whether you call this a point of order or what. This is one of those perfect examples of the situation. You know, technically, we could take this as the motion opens discussion. And then I guess the interpretation would be, have we already discussed it? So.
Well, the discussion ran into the presentation. There is not a clear cutoff here. So I'm sorry, Board Member Goff, but that happens to us.
Well,
But could I just
since the
counter?
motion was made, it would seem fitting that people have a chance to make comments
Sure.
now
Sure.
on that motion.
Right. But no,
So-
but not an alternative motion. Board Member Flores.
Okay,
Okay,
so
comment?
I would like to kind of have this, just monitor it. I would like to monitor this bill and see.
So use your
where-
vote as we proceed on this. Any other discussions?
I'll vote no.
So are we back?
She says your name.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, I was just.
Anyone else who wants to discuss this some more? Please continue.
Board Member Goff.
Yes.
Board Member McClellan.
Yes.
Board Member Rankin.
No.
Board Member Shuffle.
Yes.
Board Member Schroeder.
Yes.
That motion passes 3-2.
Does
I'm
that
sorry.
work?
No, it doesn't. 4-2. 4-2, my apologies.
Is that sufficient for support? Is it that's two-thirds, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
That's
two-thirds.
what our rules say. I would comment also
Board Member Goff.
that as always, we always have the opportunity, we have open moves on bringing back something, reconsidering, revisiting, as it goes through the committees. So,
Well, I'm just thinking of a biography that I'm reading on Grant. And poor Grant, boy, I mean, he did take at one point when he was depressed, drink too much. His wife was away and such. And, you know, he tried really hard his whole life, but that drinking episode just stayed with him his whole life. And
That
I
is
just,
life. That is life.
I was sad.
Discuss this, or is that done now? Are we done?
So our support passes, right, Ms. Cordial?
Yes, and obviously this is I can tell, a topic of serious interest for you all. I will keep you informed as this bill evolves, and if things change in the bill that may impact your position one way or another, we, as Board Member Goff points out, always have the ability to revisit the position.
Okay.
So we'll stay on close.
And so Board Member Rankin's concerns about sunsetting, you will bring forward?
I will communicate that with the sponsors, yes.
Well, this is, a concern of mine is that I vote no on this, and it makes me look like, it doesn't make me look good. And that's not my intent. My intent is to make the bill look good. And so I am not a no vote on this. I am a monitor. But if we had to vote to pass it, then I am a no. And I want that on the record.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. I like it to be monitored, but and then, you know, just looking back on life, on these 70 years of mine, and I just think that we need to be careful of who we, you know, point that finger at, and make sure that indeed that person is guilty before, you know, we ruin lives.
I understand.
Madam Chair, and I just want to say, I would love to know what skin cream you use, Dr. Flores, because 70 does not seem obvious on your face, but we can have that conversation another day. If you don't mind, I will quickly update you on just a couple other things that are happening at the Capitol around bills you've taken a position on and
We
the
would
budget
appreciate
process.
that, thank you.
So We are pretty far into the state budget process. I anticipate the long bill will be introduced about a week and a half from now in the House. That means that between now and then, there's a whole lot of conversation and negotiation going on. The department had its figure-setting hearing yesterday. It was a really good hearing. It was one of the best we've had in a long time in terms of staff recommending support for the budget request the department had made, including the transcription item for the state board, and almost all of those being approved. There's a few outstanding items, but nothing hugely material at this point. They did not make any decisions about school finance yesterday, and that is very typical. The numbers are so big when it comes to funding the school finance system that they typically wait until they're a little farther in the process. And the real trigger is on Monday, they will receive a new economic forecast. And that is, under statute, those are the numbers they have to kind of budget to. So everyone's waiting to get the official news about, I mean, I hate to say it this way, but how much money there is to spend. And then they go figure out how to, spend the last pieces of it. So that's very typical in where we are in the process. We'll keep a close eye on it, and so far so good from a department perspective.
Is this early, or is my memory failing me? It just seems to me that we're figuring out our finances usually at the end of the system. That's not.
No, that's usually how it is for education.
Pardon?
I don't think it's early.
It's not early for the long bill?
Madam Chair, yeah, I think it's about normal.
All right.
Keep in mind, though, that this may be what you're referring to, the School Finance Act comes after the budget.
Okay.
So what they typically do in the long bill is kind of set aside, they make the big decision about making up numbers. We're going to spend $500 on K-12 education, and we set that aside as part of the budget process. But then more details about how that $500 is going to be spent comes through the School Finance Act.
Thank you. That's my confusion.
Okay. And then I'll just quickly touch on some other bills you all have taken positions on. House Bill 1222, the statutory review bill, was in committee on Monday. The bill died on a unanimous vote. Obviously, it's bipartisan if it's unanimous. I think Steve and Jane did an amazing job testifying on your all's behalf as a board and expressing support for the idea of reviewing statutes. I think it was very clear throughout the hearing. I think everybody said the general concept here is not what people object to, but the way the bill went about it was concerning, obviously, to you all in a variety of parties, and those arguments won the day. Senate Bill 11, which is what we colloquially refer to as the pizza party bill. You guys remember this one? This is the one that says that if a student's parents have excused them from an assessment, they cannot be excluded from any sort of reward that the school is providing for kids who took the test. That bill passed the Senate floor this week, so it's done in the Senate. It was amended per your request in the Senate Education Committee. I know it's hard to keep all these things in our memories, but you all wanted a section of that bill removed. That section did get removed, came out of Senate Education, and is off the Senate floor, and now will start its journey through the House soon. And then finally, and maybe, I don't know if Colleen's still here or not, but this is very important for her and her work. House Bill 1100, which is the bill that allows 3 more years of continuous spending authority for the teacher licensure system, has made it all the way through the process. It is on its way to the governor's desk, and I don't anticipate any problems there. So we are, from my list for you all for the session, we can check off one thing. The list is quite a bit longer than that. And to that end, we talked a little bit about the accountability bill in our meeting on Friday. We hope to have a new draft in the next couple of days. We will share that with you along with the explanatory materials, because I think, as we've all learned, that bill is really hard to read. Just reading the bill does not tell, probably tells Julie what it does, but doesn't tell most non-lawyer people what it does. So we'll get that to you as quickly as we can, and I'm anticipating introduction sometime next week on that.
Great.
Anything else?
Colleagues? Thank you, Ms. Mel.
Yeah, see y'all tonight.
That's right. State Board will now consider and adopt final determination for the accountability recommendation concerning Martinez Elementary School, case number 18 AR01. Public testimony will not be heard at this time. However, department staff and legal counsel are available to answer any final questions we may have. Commissioner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if we have a presentation on this, so I believe this is just the final vote. We had the testimony at the last meeting, and the documentation has been prepared per your request, and so I believe it's an action item for vote.
Great, thank you. So by June 30th, the district shall sign a revised version of the accreditation contract, which will incorporate by reference to the written final determination. Signed copies of the revised contract will be made available to both parties. And we have the contract in our materials. I'm not sure whether anyone needs to read it or not. Board Member Rankin, make a motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to approve the final written determination as proposed by the district to direct Martinez Elementary School to implement its pathway proposal for their innovation plan as filed with the State Board on February 15th, 2018.
It's a proper motion. Do I have a second? Second. I have 2 seconds. Thank you. Any more comment about this? I think they made a great presentation. I think we were happy to see that they were already underway in their improvement efforts, and so it seems appropriate for us to move forward. Ms. Cordial, would you be good enough to call the roll?
Board Member Durham.
Yes.
Board Member Flores.
Yes.
Board Member Goff.
Yes.
Board Member McClellan.
Yes.
Board Member Rankin.
Yes.
Board Member Shuffle.
Yes.
And Board Member Schroeder.
Yes.
Thank you. That that
great.
motion passes 7-0.
So we didn't even need to call them, right, on the phone? Okay, good. So if you'll send them a
Yes, we will let them know.
text, I'll
Thank
bet
you.
they're listening. Yeah. This scares me that we're ahead of schedule. Well, we'll get through exec session, but you can have high hopes today, Board Member Flores. An executive session has been noticed for today's, oops, that's you.
Madam Chair, if it works for Bill Cotton Study, would you want to take the 2 charter waiver requests that are scheduled for this afternoon?
Sure.
Since it's 11?
This is 16, 2.2 and 2.3.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Should we take a quick break to see if he, I'm not sure that he is available. Let me just see if
Yeah, 16, 22.
And 23.
23.
You're doing 16, 22.
Yes, the 23.
Can we take them both at the same time? Because it's,
That's the plan.
okay, thank you.
Although I don't think they're alike, exactly.
Well, they both don't have an instrument.
They both don't have a what?
A preschool instrument to show us. There wasn't. You know, we talked about it last time, and I thought they'd come up with an instrument that we could see, but there is no instrument to evaluate preschool kids. It's the,
Well, that was 1621. And we took it off the consent agenda, or we put it back on the consent agenda. Yeah.
Because they,
Yeah.
or will report. We're not telling what the instrument should be.
That may be the, well,
Ms. Cordial, what's the word?
Trying to reach out.
Oh, okay.
reaching out.
Do we want to take a quick break while I see if we
Sure.
can make this work? Okay.
Okay. You guys can have a quick break. Not a long walk. Thank you for coming back, Mr. Cottonsetti.
Oh, yeah, thanks for having me.
Um,
You guys were faster than I expected. So.
Well, I think it makes it hard for staff, but ideally, if you guys can keep one ear to what we're up to, because we do kind of flip the schedule around
Okay.
sometimes, and
If we can.
I don't want to say we lie, but sometimes our objectives are mistaken, and
Okay.
time either opens or we can't get to stuff. So thank you
Gotcha.
for coming back. We'd like to talk about two items, charter items that
Okay.
contain waiver requests. The first is Poudre School District's request for waiver on behalf of Ridgeview Classical Schools. I'd ask staff to give a brief presentation before I entertain a motion.
Okay. So the waiver request from Ridgeview, in general, the waivers looked fine. But there were two waivers where typically on these ones, we look for particular language around how the school will meet the intent of the law.
You're talking about the
And-
replacement, essentially what we call the replacement plan?
Yeah, in the replacement plan.
Thank you.
And in this situation, the school presented, they did have a replacement plan, but it wasn't quite clear for us in terms of how it would meet the intent of the law. So in those situations, what we have done is we provided side-by-side of the statute and the replacement plan with some analysis. And so for the Ridgeview request, you do have an attachment that has, it looks like this. And it provides that analysis on the two statutes where we were wanting to just provide the board an opportunity to evaluate the waiver themselves.
May I make a?
Board Member Flores?
Yes, I wanted to just say that I thought that what we were going to get was an evaluation instrument, as we have had in the past when people want to, you know, to have their own, do their own instrument. But this was not the case here. We just were given back, you know, law. And since every other district that has come before us and has wanted to waive the preschool individualized readiness plan or instrument, they usually came back with an instrument,
Okay.
and this wasn't done.
Thank you.
So I don't think.
Dr. Flores, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Madam, are you talking about a replacement plan? Is the, your term of instrument, or?
No, I'm talking about, well, they give the plan, but I want to see the instrument that they're going to use, and that's.
Oh, the measuring.
The
What they
measuring.
are going, did they, Mr. Concetti, did they provide, or did they enumerate what instruments they might use as replacements?
Yeah, and so on the two statutes that we looked at, one of them was on teacher evaluation.
Right.
And so they said that they will use an instrument and that they will have an evaluation process. But it wasn't specified in terms of, the main things we look for on those ones is if they're going to use assessment data as part of the evaluation, and if they would come up with a rating of effectiveness. Sometimes in what we have typically been okay with is if they say we'll meet the intent of Senate Bill 191, and I'll apologize if I got the number wrong
Right.
there.
No, you got it.
Yeah. But it wasn't clearly delineated there. And so it's possible that they could do an evaluation that wouldn't incorporate student achievement data, which doesn't mean that they aren't going to do that. It's just not delineated in their replacement plan.
So that was one, but the other one was a preschool.
Yeah, on the readiness assessment, our consideration of what they had proposed, we felt more comfortable with, because we did have a conversation with the school and confirmed with them that although the replacement plan doesn't necessarily have this specified, that they would assess within the first 60 days that they would be using a valid instrument and that they would be using it to develop an individualized plan for students.
See, but what has happened before, when other districts or schools have asked for that, they've had to really do a lot of work, and usually they present the instrument.
Yeah.
And and have their people come and talk about the plan and the instrument, and I don't think this is enough.
Okay.
I mean, I think other districts would come down on us if we allowed this to happen.
So I'm glad you brought this to our attention,
Yeah.
because we do count on staff looking carefully about the replacement plans to see if they align with the intent of the law. Not that they're identical by any chance, but they align with the intent. And it's your opinion that the kindergarten readiness plan does align with the intent of the law.
Yeah.
And they are still willing to report data, right? There's
Yes,
been no
they-
request to
they-
waive from the reporting piece.
Correct. The school would be
Okay. So the
reporting.
concerns that you've brought to us right now are about compliance with 191
Yeah. Yeah.
in both of the,
And it's not, it's just that it's not clearly delineated in
clear.
their replacement plan. So you can look at what they proposed and decide if you feel like it's sufficient or not sufficient.
I still,
And then the other one that we had flagged was on the licensure, because they're seeking a licensure waiver. And historically, schools would say we're gonna meet highly qualified status under No Child Left Behind. And in this situation, their language doesn't necessarily specify a clear minimum criteria. It does identify criteria, and so you can look at what they propose for the criteria. But then you can decide if you feel like that is a sufficient minimum criteria or not.
I mean,
Board Member Flores.
They boldly say they don't have to abide by having qualified people because they do not believe that certification is valid. I mean, they basically just throw it in your face and say, certification is not valid for, for our people. So we don't have to hire people that are certified. They basically say that. I mean, and to me, it sounded like, oh boy, this is really going into a private school, truly a private school, when they don't have to abide by, any of these rules. And that really concerned me, especially, we can just hire anybody we want to teach, and that's okay because, we know that certified teachers are not good, or, I mean, it even kind of cast aspersions on certified people, which I think is just pretty bad.
Any other comments, colleagues? Board Member Sheffield.
The only thing I would say is that the classical curriculum, having met with a number of folks that are in classical charter schools, the nature of their curriculum is somewhat different than teachers would be learning in a traditional teacher prep program. And having developed those curricula for both types of programs, for both kinds of teachers seeking jobs in different types of schools, I think that might be what they're referring to. Just because the preparation is I think, quite different as far as their content. And they go back to the trivium and the quadrivium and rhetoric and grammar, not as we would think of grammar, but it's a much different dive into that content.
So, Board Member Sheffield, then, does that mean that anyone can teach it, or that you don't necessarily have to have a license? I mean, we've had a number of situations where we have non-licensed, we give waivers for non-licensing, but they do have some minimum requirements, such as a bachelor's degree or that sort of stuff. Are you suggesting you don't need to meet any minimum requirements in
No,
order
I'm
to teach
just-
that curriculum?
Yeah, I'm just saying that a lot of these classical charters end up having to do their own professional development, or they seek teachers who've been specifically prepared in classical curriculum.
And
So
what
they
would
do
be,
it.
I think my question is, what would be some of the minimum expectations?
That would be good, or that these schools would be requiring?
Right, so we're trying to sort of align legislative intent with, in both situations. And I think legislatively, we have not required licenses, but we've required something like highly qualified, or at least a bachelor's degree and some experience, that sort of thing. Is there a reason to not have that kind of an expectation here?
I don't think so. I don't think there's a reason not to have it.
Okay. Board Member Rankin?
Ms. Pearson has put a lot of work into these performance frameworks, and I use them all the time for these kinds of questions. And I just want to point out that the classical, Ridgeview?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Ridgeview Classic.
Ridgeview Classical School District from 2010 to 2016 is all in the performance area. There's no turnaround, there's no priority. I just think that when a school is on track like that, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they'll make the best choices, and then when Ms. Pearson tells us otherwise, I'll pay attention then.
So here's the dilemma that I think we face. Are we going to base our waivers on whether the replacement plan aligns with the intent of the legislators? Or are we going to base it on performance only? I think that's where we run into a little bit of a problem, because then we're going to start arguing with where were schools if they're on the achievement. Because I think what we've said is when we grant a waiver, we expect a replacement plan. I believe that's what our expectations have been that are set. And we're just asking them to be a little more specific in their replacement plan, I believe. I don't think any of us have a concern
Madam
about them
Chair,
not having it.
I am under the assumption, and I could be wrong, that the fact that it even comes to us and is on a consent agenda or up before us is because our department has already said they meet the legal requirements.
Except for these two. That's why they flagged them for us.
Me,
So
Well,
that's why they're flagged. Not by us, but they're flagged by the department going through.
so what they're saying is they're still going to bring them to us, but they don't meet the requirements? Is that what we're saying?
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Madam Vice Chair, I think what we did is just in the normal course of our evaluation of replacement plans, as we do for all things, we just make sure it's complete, make sure that there's some sufficient information there. If there is, we recommend them for consent. If there's not, we talk to the board chair and the vice chair at agenda setting, and we just say, here's a question we had, what would you like to do with it? At that point, which we brought to you all a week or so ago, you said you would like to have a discussion about it at the board. So that's why we're here at the board. But we left that decision fully up to you. But we just, we bring anything to you just if it's a little bit out of the ordinary in the course of review. But it's a policy decision. So we don't make the decision. We let you make the decision right here.
may I
On
just,
if it's sufficient
excuse
for
me.
you. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Board Member Flores.
I just want to read something that they wrote. Richview Classical School has always employed teachers qualified for the job and does not believe that a teaching certificate qualifies an individual to teach. Now, that's almost irreverent should be irreverent to this board, because we require teaching certificates. Now, that they want to, on top of a teaching certificate, do other training, which we know that many schools do, that's fine. But to throw it in your face that they believe that a teaching certificate does not qualify an individual to teach, is kind of harsh.
I think what Board Member Scheffel suggested is that our license does not qualify sufficiently in order to teach that curriculum. Am I right
Well,
in
and
interpreting what you said?
and
And
I
I don't
preface
think
that
that, I don't think that's, yeah,
And
it's
I preface
specialized.
that with, most teachers do get, especially if they're going into a special program, do get other kinds of training on top of a certificate. But the minimum is a certificate or a license. And when they say that the job does not believe that a teaching certificate qualifies an individual to teach, I don't know, that's going a little far. That's all I'm saying.
Board Member Goff.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but I'm going to go to the real practical, realistic points right now, is that the Charter School Act, the law, does not say that certificate, a license is required. The waiver process itself is very often built, well, enacted, or we carry it out based on that point. So if a charter school files a waiver that says we're going to take the job of hiring and basing our hiring practices on certain sets of qualifications, the waiver process allows them to do that.
Do they have a bachelor's degree in?
Well, my understanding is that all of the qualifications that any particular charter school sets forth for their hiring is based on the mission and the intent of their school.
Yeah.
And the law allows them to make those choices and to carry it out that way. I believe, not for today, but at some point, whatever the updates are available. I didn't get to go to the CASB conference and hear the latest figures on this, so forgive me. But
They didn't give figures on
the
this.
majority of a vast number, I'll put it that way, a vast number of teachers in charter schools are licensed. Colorado has a large number of licensed charter
Right,
school
but
teachers.
we're not talking about, we're talking about this
I'm just
particular
trying to,
one that we're discussing.
set a real true picture that I think is important for us to make these kinds of decisions on. Charter schools have the right, they have by law, the right to set their hiring practices, set their qualifications, and go for it.
Well,
So, and frankly,
we should
Val,
call
I
them
understand.
private schools
I was
then.
not rubbed real well by the way that sentence was written either.
And it goes on and on.
It's subjective. A lot of work that goes on is a very subjective viewpoint. And,
Yeah.
Values are going to come out how they are. And I agree. I think I would have made a different kind of word choice. But it's really,
But
it's not an
it's throughout
untrue
the
statement.
document. I read the whole thing, and it was almost like a cartoon. Da, 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 da. Here, you board.
Maybe that's what's flickering, not the lights so much.
Board Member Durham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think it's an unfair statement to say that a license does not qualify someone to do whatever they're licensed for. We see on a very regular basis physicians who lose their license because they're deemed to be incompetent to practice, but they manage to get a license. We see that true with attorneys. We have a major retrial of a murder case from Mesa County now going on in Jefferson County based on the Supreme Court's acceptance that the counsel that the defendant had was ineffective. So and all these people were licensed. There aren't any unlicensed people practicing in front of the courts. And I think I have to say from personal experience that it's, that a license might be a measure, but it's certainly not the only measure of whether or not someone is competent to teach school. And it really gets back to the old debate of, particularly as we see in the rural schools, we have somebody that has had a career in physics or mathematics, that's retired in a rural district and is willing to teach even in a public school without a certificate for a while.
That's different.
That's deemed, I don't,
That's
these
different.
are all public schools, and part of what the legislature did, and I think you have to keep in mind that, that charter schools tend to outperform non-charters,
Some.
although the margin is not huge. And yesterday over at the Capitol, I think there was Charter School Day, and they had some very interesting charts up that in terms of the percentage of minority students they educate is greater than those educated in non-charter public schools. The free and reduced lunch is equivalent. So by all measures, you would have to say they get a slightly better outcome. And this is a requirement that they've never had to hire licensed teachers. So to some extent, I think you have to trust the judgment of the people doing the hiring, and I think to Ms. Rankin's point, at least part of the proof is in the pudding, that if their performance, then we have reason to believe that the people who are in charge of making those decisions have made a reasonably good decision. And So I'm not offended by the statement, because in the real world where we live, everybody from plumbers and electricians all the way to physicians lose their ability or lose their license because they prove to be incompetent. So it's not a guarantee of performance at necessarily even a minimum level.
So here's a dilemma that I see by virtue of these two particular items. One of them says we are going to hire teachers and evaluate them based on their competence, but then we see that their evaluation system, their replacement plan for their evaluation system doesn't align with the evaluation law. So I'm troubled by the combination of those two, right? We're not going to have an adequate evaluation system, and we're not going to have any kind of clear description of the folks that we hire. And I think those two together provide a risk to parents. I would be a whole lot more comfortable if we could have them indicate that they have a teacher evaluation plan that is robust, so that no matter who they hire, I never get that right, we know that they're evaluated, that student growth is a part of their evaluation system, et cetera, rather than being unclear in both of those, because those two are, in my opinion, those are connected. And we've had that discussion, that maybe districts ought to be free to hire anyone as long as they very, very carefully evaluate them. But the combination of the two, I think, is problematic, because it really says, I'm not going to tell you what we're going to do about these teachers.
And then we have...
Go ahead, Board
And
Member
then
Flores.
we have a law that says we're going to have to, provide the monies too for equality, if you will, for paying charter schools and public schools. But I think that you have to make, you have to be accountable too. And I just think that if you're going to have a plan that's kind of different, you should place it in here as part of documentation that we should see. I feel the same way about the preschool individualized readiness. And I'm talking about the evaluation instrument. We have had several people that have asked to be to be exempt from it, and when they do, they bring those instruments and they show us. But here we have people who are, in a way, flaunting, I think, kind of jurisdiction, and it just doesn't feel good, It like I said, it's like Daffy Duck, in a cartoon. Hey, we got it. So.
Board Member Rankin.
I hate to keep pointing to Ms. Pearson, but I just have to, because that's an evaluation system. And are we these waivers, do they come at us every year, these non-charter waivers?
So, like, as mentioned this morning, so when it's a new school, they'll have a blanket set of waivers for the first time. And then on a renewal school, typically the list of waivers have already been approved, but because it's a new contract, it does require board action to approve the waivers, and there could be modifications on the margin.
Okay. So I talked about Ridgeview Classical 2010 to 2016, all performance. I'll go to the next one, which is Flagstaff Academy, same thing. And I think what we have to do is think about what we're doing here. I mean, there's a lot of work put into this. Are we going to use it? And who's going to benefit from this if we have a different evaluation of a teacher? Right now, the students, unless our evaluation, and Ms. Pearson's is wrong, are at school. Both of these schools are in performance plan areas. I think that's extremely commendable. If next year they're all both on turnaround, I would say maybe we made a mistake and we have to change that again. But for now, why take the ones that are successful and put more of a burden if they've already decided on what they'd like to do, and it seems to be working. And I know Ms. Goff has said many times we've got to step back from stuff and take that higher level and not get down into the real detail, and sometimes I have to do that. And if this is subjective, I have no problem with letting both of these schools take care of what it is they want to do. They're on the right track right now.
Okay, provide us the plan, provide us the evaluation instrument, and I'll be okay with it. And seeing that the evaluation instrument is, and I think you taught preschool, I believe, or you were a kindergarten teacher? I don't know. I thought you taught.
I did in California, though,
Yes.
not Utah.
So I think you have, and I know I taught that grade level, so we might be, when we look at these instruments, I think, we've had them before from other districts, and I don't think we should just kind of lower the bar for these two.
Board Member Sheffield.
I would just say that there's a great benefit, I think, to allowing these schools to have the maximum flexibility under the law if they're performing well. And regulations are put in place for a reason, and when they're necessary, and we regulate a lot, then they serve a function. But in this case, the school is doing very well as far as performance outcomes, and there is flexibility built into the law, and to allow schools to use that flexibility strikes me as actually supporting their great outcomes. So the regulations are in place if needed.
Yeah, but then we're going to
So I
have.
agree with you, except that under the law, one of these just simply does not align with 191. My best guess is the revaluation system does align with 191, and they're just not willing to put it in their plan. And I find that confusing. I don't understand why they wouldn't be.
I find it
Madam Chair.
pertinent.
Could he comment to what I just
Sure.
blathered in there?
My best understanding as to how this probably happened is the last time that this school was up for renewal, 191 hadn't taken effect. And so I think that they replicated the replacement plan that they had before. And at that time, it met the intent of the statute.
Did you by any chance get back to them and ask them for
We
a little more
reached out.
specificity?
We reached out, but we weren't able to confirm before the board meeting today.
Okay. Board Member Durham?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, I don't want to be pejorative in my remarks, but we have schools that fail all over Hell's Half Acre, and they have
Abide by the
we
law.
have all of these plans written out, and they're perfect, and they're just wonderful. There's only one minor problem: the kids fail. So here we have somebody where we don't have the kids fail, but now we say, well, you didn't say Mother May I just quite right, and therefore we're going to put you through the expense and trouble of trying to say, well, let's give us the Mother May I words that we can all feel good about. The only thing we ought to feel good or bad about is whether or not these kids are getting a proper education. And beyond that, if they meet the criteria of the law, which I think it's the opinion that they do, then let's just move on and let's focus on those areas where we have kids that are prisoners in schools that don't perform. So we're misplacing our time, our staff's time, and the resources, because somebody's going to have to rewrite this. Now, they can probably take it off the shelf and put it in, and we can all say, boy, isn't that great, look what we accomplished. What we accomplished was killing another tree or two.
So, Mr. Durham, if I may just try to clarify my position or my question, which is, are we granting waivers on the basis of the performance of the districts, and if the kids are doing well, they can have whatever waiver they wish and not require a replacement plan? Or are we going to align with what we say, which is that when we grant waivers, that we happily grant waivers, but that we expect to see a replacement plan that aligns with the intent of our legislators. They're over there working across the street, and they do have purpose to what they do. They're not always happy with us granting waivers, but to the extent that our districts work in alignment with what expectations are, we definitely grant them. So I don't think it's about, I think we're getting in some pretty difficult areas when we start saying it's only about the performance.
Could I?
I think we have in front of us here with Ridgeview as the example. The school will continue to use its own version of kindergarten readiness assessment. The assessment includes the following components: cooperation, creative arts, initiative and curiosity, persistence and attentiveness, math knowledge and skills, and so on and so forth. That is a replacement plan. We're being asked to suggest whether that is adequate, whether that is an adequate replacement plan.
And staff has told us that's fine. The only two areas were the qualifications of the teachers and the evaluation system.
We know the statute does not require. We know the statute does not require qualifications of teachers. So, to the extent we are requiring that in a replacement plan, we may very well be exceeding our authority under the statute. And so if that's what's missing, and I get the feeling that we think that's what's missing, show me the statutory requirement says they have to have that as a component. And if they don't have to have that as a component, then what we're judging is that it has will be responsible for the evaluation of its employee and use the same metrics for evaluation since the founding of the school via multiple modalities, including direct observations and written observations, among others. Now, it would have been nice if they'd named 2 or 3 other things, and frankly, if they'd named 2 or 3 other things, we wouldn't be having this discussion. They just didn't enumerate probably all the things they do. So I think we're being asked. Our statutory requirement is this adequate? Well, could it be a little more detailed? Yes. Does that make it inadequate? In this mode, I don't think it is, because Ms. Pearson, tell me if I'm wrong. The statute allows them not to have licensed teachers, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
That's Julie.
That's true.
So anything we would do would be contrary to statute. Contrary.
You know, Steve, here's the thing. I think that they probably do have an instrument for evaluating teachers, because I don't know if I would teach someplace that wouldn't show me, an instrument that here's how you're going to be evaluated. I think I would ask for that. And I'm sure it's something easy to attach. It wouldn't take much. And the other one for the preschool readiness evaluation instrument that they use, I'm sure it's the same. They could have attached it. If it's the first time and we don't, I'm sure it could be attached, and it wouldn't be a lot of trouble. And that's all we're asking, Steve. We're not asking them to go and,
So are we, Dr. Flores, are we asking them to attach the same or something similar, an evaluation instrument that's used across the state? When I think we had the presentation on this, it said 96 or 5 or some percent of the teachers were effective, which I don't happen to believe, and I hope no one else on this board believes, because if we had 95% of the teachers that were effective, we wouldn't have a majority of the kids that are below proficient.
But we want to be fair.
There's a little disconnect somewhere.
Well, I'm thinking about fairness here of what we asked other school districts to do, and they went to a lot of trouble even to come before us. Not that these people didn't before, but they attached an instrument, they brought their teachers, and, if we're asking that of other school districts, why should we not have the same criteria for these people? And I think it's just being fair about it.
I think the legislature clearly said that that they want different standards so that people may innovate, and so we may have the opportunity, both as a state board and as a legislature to try and view what's effective and what isn't effective. And so a good part of the reason for the whole charter school law initially was to say, let's see if we can find out if there's a better way to do these things. And I don't think there's, at least in my mind, classical education, and if you look at the results of the schools that use it, they are among our very highest performing schools in the state.
Well, maybe if we had...
Absolutely no question.
If we had an evaluation instrument that showed superior training and such, and maybe, I mean, that's part of it. That's part of accountability, that they have to show and then demonstrate, and so that they can be replicated. So that's part of it. That's part of giving them that freedom.
Board Member Rankin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Cottonsetti, in the future, if there is any questionable item that they have not included, rather than bring this to us, could you ask them to include it with them?
So we do, when we see areas of concern, we attempt to reach out to them, and sometimes we just aren't able to get connected to them.
Meaning you did reach out, but they didn't send it in, or you didn't get connected on the...
So typically we start by reaching out to the authorizer, and then we weren't able to get a response in terms of whether the school planned to change. So we reached out to the school, but we weren't able to get confirmation from them before the agenda, or before the agenda deadline.
You reach to the authorizer or to the school?
We typically begin by working with the authorizer, because the authorizer submits the waiver requests on behalf of the school. But recognizing that at times the authorizers, might have multiple things on their plate, we'll reach out to the school and try to keep the authorizer informed.
So if we go back to the beginning of this discussion, I believe we were talking about some of this decision is going to be subjective. Is that right, Ms. Tolleson?
It is, and let me just back up to one piece that I think, because we had this exchange about licenses. It is true that generally Colorado statute, our old days, right, required that to be hired as a school teacher you had to have a license, and the idea was a license was a proxy for CDE has evaluated qualifications and training, education, character, fingerprints, all of that stuff. So the waiver, the way I would read the statute is to say you can waive out of having to have a license, but your replacement is some description of how we handle that vetting, and that's where you saw a lot of charter schools rely on that old No Child Left Behind. It's like basically HQ kind of focus. We're going to just be sure that people are subject matter experts in whatever they were teaching. So I do think it's within the board's authority to expect that the replacement plan articulate sort of how minimum competencies are judged to hire somebody for teaching. So I'm answering more than you asked, but just dovetailing with my last response to Board Member Durham.
Madam Chair, can I ask a clarification here?
Sure, Mr. Durham.
That's for hiring, initial hiring, correct?
Well,
if I read this correctly, we're dealing with evaluations, not hiring.
Well, except for the statute that triggered that was the request that they have waivers from all of the aspects of the Teacher Employment Compensation and Dismissal Act. And then I know that the chair had mentioned, and not only that, without an evaluation system, then how do we know that they're ensuring sort of quality on that ongoing basis? So I had tracked the discussion as talking about how those two pieces intersected, but if I've missed it, I'm happy.
Do they intersect? I mean, it would appear to me you can hire somebody, and that's not what all this replacement plan's talking. You don't have to have a replacement plan about hiring, because the law says you can hire somebody without a license. So they don't need a waiver for that.
Yeah, but
Is that correct?
Well, it's one of the automatic.
Right.
Right.
So they get that waiver by virtue of contract approval. So that's done. So now we're in evaluation. So we're not, what am I missing here? You use the criteria for hiring, which is not applicable to this waiver request.
What the replacement plan process gives you all the authority to do, in my view, is to ensure that the fundamental underlying principles for which the evaluation statutes and the model exist, which is to be sure that there's competencies, and I know there was a discussion about whether or not there'd be a data component to how teachers are evaluated. I mean, I do think you all have some flexibility in determining what you think is sort of minimum good enough to grant that relief.
And there really isn't.
So,
I
Mr.
don't
Durham,
think-
I'm
It
not,
could be very
I'm not
novel.
challenging the teachers they're hiring. I'm suggesting that they need to have an evaluation system that is aligned with 191 in order to ensure that no matter whom they hire, they're being evaluated and their teachers are identified as being effective or ineffective. Because that's what the legislation requires. A replacement plan does not require them to use the state model or anything of that order, but that it has a system that allows for the determination of whether they're effective or not effective, and that it aligns with using student outcome data as part of their evaluation system, as opposed to going back to the old system where you just observe a teacher.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, but I would suggest that the test results, of which 50%, up to 50% of any evaluation of a teacher, if I remember 191, can be based on test results. Based on the performance of the school, I would suggest that these teachers have all passed that.
Probably so, but an aggregated number of performance does not tell us, teacher by teacher, whether they are effective or not effective.
Madam Chair, if this is the level of detail this board's going to go into, it's no wonder Colorado education is in the state
Come
that
on,
it's
come
in,
on,
because
come on.
this is the most bureaucratized discussion that I've had the chance to participate in 3 years. We want, by God, as a state board, we're going to make sure every one of these teachers meets that criteria, and that's our job. That's not our job. It's not our job. That's the job of the people that hire them. That's not our job. And they can have all the 191, purpose of 191 is to provide a rationale for dismissal. So the
I would disagree
rationale
with
which
that.
you're trying to
I would
even,
disagree with that
they don't,
completely.
and they don't need a rationale for dismissal
No,
in
they
this
don't.
instance. That's what 191 is. Ms. Tollefson, 191 is to provide a rationale for dismissal. Is that correct?
I'm going to beg off that one a little bit and say, I don't know what was in the minds of, that's its primary function in the traditional school district context, absolutely, to tie ineffective classroom performance to the opportunity to dismiss a teacher. I think the educators on the board would probably also talk about the formative role of teacher evaluation and
That's
all of
right.
that, and I'm going to get out of my league in a hurry in that conversation.
Thank you.
Board Member Goff?
As for the question.
Dr. Flores highlighted the paragraph, first main paragraph. Ridgeview Classical Schools will be responsible for the evaluation of its employees and has used the same metrics for evaluation since the founding of the school. Have those never been produced? I mean, if waivers have been requested in the past,
Yeah.
what has been shown to be the tool?
I'd have to go back and look to see if there was ever a submission to us.
Yeah, and I came across maybe as a little direct on you right this second. Didn't intend that to be, but it's a question that I'm finding it interesting that we're talking like we are, because if there's a tool and it has been acceptable as a replacement plan up to this point,
Yeah. And they've asked for it, but they haven't gotten it.
what's the problem? The other thing is,
That's what I mean.
everybody's right, I will not repeat. Whatever the hiring criteria is a whole separate issue.
Yes.
From this evaluation
We
process.
agree.
So, as far as talking about what the original rationale was behind 191, let's not go there today.
Board Member Rankin?
If we've totally exhausted this conversation, which I think we have,
I call for the question.
we don't have a
Oh,
motion.
we don't have a motion.
I just would like to make a comment about some of the things that have been said, and I believe we're getting bogged down with the process, and what our endpoint is the success of the students. And of course, I'll vote with the students every time. I move to approve Poudre School District's request for waivers on behalf of Ridgeview Classical Schools as set forth in the published agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a second.
Any further comments? Do you want to call the roll?
Board Member Durham.
Yes.
Board Member Flores.
No.
Board Member Goff.
Yes.
Board Member McClellan.
Yes.
Board Member Rankin.
Yes.
Board Member Shuffle.
Yes.
Board Member Schroeder.
No.
That
Passes.
motion passes 5-2.
I don't know. We just approved it all. I don't think there is a next one.
Yeah,
Is
there's
there?
the
You know-
next one.
Yeah, it's-
Nope.
Oh, we did them both in the same?
No,
Yes.
no.
The
There's
other was,
623.
Yeah.
It's another, it's
Okay.
a whole nother piece. And
Yep.
I think we should take that on after lunch. Is that right,
and
Ms.
yes,
Or Jill?
maybe just back in the order of the agenda this afternoon. Later this afternoon.
Which means what?
So it would just go, so we'll have lunch
We're
and
gonna have
executive
a lot
session,
of
we'll have a
districts.
1:30 rulemaking hearing. We have a couple of other presentations, and then we'll just take this after I believe, the standards review and revision process. If that works.
Mr. Costetti, we are just really messing up your day, I'm
No, it's
afraid.
fine. That's what I'm here for, so.
No, we're supposed to be done at 11:30.
Oh.
Am I right?
That's correct. You're
Are
correct.
you sure?
Yes, so we have a 90-minute schedule for exec session this afternoon. So from noon to 1:30. And then we'll have the 1:30 rulemaking hearing.
So we have 15 minutes for a walk.
Thank you.
We do have 15
I don't get to make
It should
that
be that
decision, but it
Yes.
seemed like a good idea.
Yes.
It's a good idea.
Unless, yeah, I'm not even gonna.
All
vote on
right.
this. Nope.
Ms. Cordial, do you want to call us into exec session, please?
Of course. Back to that script.
Yeah, it's supposed to be 12. Busy, look at it.
Right, 12 to 1:30.
Right, and it's 11:45.
Correct. I just wasn't sure if the second conversation was gonna take as long as this one.
We're going to fly through it. We're going to
Do
fly
you
through
think
it.
so?
No.
Okay.
Who did we lose? Steve?
Okay,
Yeah. Val's right there.
okay, so we will continue.
So,
Okay.
sorry. Let's see if we can get through this next one,
Okay.
please.
That motion should have been that we asked them to provide those things.
You're free to make a motion at any time, board member.
Right now, even after I.
No, we've already voted on it, it's over. So if you had a different motion that you wanted, you needed to make it. Sorry, Steve. We are hoping that 1623 will be a whole lot faster,
Well, if we're
because
sitting
there's
down-
only one issue on that one, am I correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Should I start, or?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah, this one's pretty straightforward. So we did a review of the replacement plans, and we thought everything looked fine for this school. However, it was flagged because they did request the school readiness reporting waiver, which was a conversation topic last month. And so the question that we were asked by the board chair and vice chair was to allow the board to have a conversation if they deemed appropriate on whether to grant that particular waiver.
Where
And-
does that waiver, do you know where that waiver comes in terms of the?
Yeah, it is on the agenda, on the memo. It's the fourth bullet point, 22-7-1019, subparagraph 4. And what was flagged is just the question of
Reporting.
would the school be granted a waiver on reporting?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I will point something out, that in the process of reading their request, they talk
Yeah.
about Evans School District.
Walsenburg?
Okay.
Yeah, they have to.
What do they have with Evans School District?
I'm not sure what page is that on.
So there's no page numbers,
Okay.
but in the section CRS 22-33-104, compulsory school attendance, says the Evans School District reserves the right to approve the plan once it has been created.
Okay.
In Evans?
I'm guessing it's probably a typo on the part of
It
the
is a
school.
It's districts copying each other, which is sort of my point, is that they all work together and copy each other's materials, and I think we have an obligation to
Yeah.
be looking.
Okay.
And so in this one, I would like to make a motion that they add the evaluation, they attach the evaluation to the document so that we can see it before we vote on it.
We're not voting on the evaluation, we are only,
Well, voting that they attach it, they don't have it. They don't have the document. So, and we won't.
for their kindergarten
For their
readiness.
Yes, for their preschool. And what we've done before, remember, Kiowa was the first one. They had to do a big ado. Walsenburg was another one, another big ado. We haven't, and then everybody else came, you know? So we're gonna have 178, I don't know how many we've approved already, but it's a considerable number of school districts who might come before us asking for dispensation or to not have one available.
So this
And
is a
all
s- school that already exists, right?
Yes,
This is just
yeah.
a renewal, and the only change from prior, correct me if I'm wrong, please.
Yeah.
The only change from prior charter waivers is that they now know that there's a reporting requirement, and they're requesting to not report their kindergarten readiness data.
Yeah, so I am 99% certain that the school already had the school readiness assessment waiver, so that gave them flexibility to administer a local assessment, and that the change would be that they're now requesting the waiver on reporting.
Right.
Yeah.
And the last board meeting, just to help Dr. Sheff a little bit, we talked about this, and we said that though there are a number of replacement plans for identifying school readiness, because that data is reported in the aggregate, there's no personally identifiable data sent to the state. We believe that the legislature still wants us to keep looking at school readiness and changes in school readiness. Based on some of the legislation that's been passed recently, for example, the changes in the accountability law, it's pretty clear to me that the legislature is still very concerned about early childhood and school readiness. And so it was our inclination last month to say we would like the reporting. And if I remember reading this correctly, they did say that they've got all the data, they're collecting all the data. It's just a matter of their willingness to send it over to us. Am I right?
Yeah, their replacement
was in
plan
there.
identified that they use Alpine Achievement to
Right.
warehouse the data.
And they have the data, so it's just really a question of whether we ask them to forward it like every other school district. Any questions or comments on a motion? Actually, I'm not sure how the motion,
I know how it should be.
you know how to do it?
I
Okay,
think
thank
so.
you.
I move to approve a charter waiver request submitted by St. Vrain Valley School District on behalf of the Flagstaff Academy as set forth in the published agenda.
And ask for the
So
data.
it just depends, that would just include the reporting waiver.
I think you need to exclude
You need to add that they reported.
So the way, just for clarification, the way that it's kind of proposed for you all, the very first motion is just for the board to approve all of their waiver requests, including the one that was flagged, the reporting
Here's the first one,
waiver. The second two options highlights
page 25.
denying first the reporting waiver, and then the board's reasoning for that denial. And then after that, approving all of the other waivers included, all of the other waivers that they've requested. So I just want to, however you want to do it is fine, I just want to clarify.
We're working on it.
Okay.
Let me try this one.
Okay.
You forgot the denial.
We want to deny the waiver to report, and that's all. Other than that, we're granting all their waivers, right? We're granting all their waivers except the one,
the
the
report.
request to,
It's at the bottom of page 25.
Yes, yep, that's the first part.
I move to deny St. Vrain Valley School District's request for waiver of CRS 22-7-1019, paren 4, on behalf of Flagstaff Academy for the following reasons.
If you would like to share or use the same reason that was used last month, you'll see an example.
State Board
below.
would like to and are required to report the results of their assessments to the legislature.
Do I have a second? We're actually,
Second.
okay. So do we vote on that, or do we
Yes.
continue the motion?
I believe you would vote on that, and then that can kind of determine whether or not that second motion is necessary. Because if it fails, then,
Okay.
do you see what I'm saying?
Would you call the roll, please?
Board Member Durham.
Yes.
Board Member Flores.
Yes.
Board Member Goff.
Yes.
Board Member Shuffle.
Yes.
Board Member McClellan.
Yes.
Sorry, I went out of order. Board Member Rankin.
Yes.
Board Member Schroeder.
Sure.
There we go.
Um,
Sure?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, that motion
We're a
passes.
little confused. Now we need to make the second motion in order to grant all the other waiver requests.
That is
Approve
Correct.
all but the report.
Approve all.
So you want me to read this?
Well,
I move to approve St. Vrain Valley School District's requests for the following waivers of CRS Section 22-1-110, 22-2-112, paren 1, paren Q,
That-
paren
I think that should be an A.
L, 22-7-1014, paren 2, paren A, 22-9-106, 22-32-109, paren 1B, paren 1, paren B, 22-32-109, paren 1, paren N. Is that an I?
I think it's Roman numeral 1.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
Is that, okay, or is it
Or Roman numeral 1.
Roman
yeah.
numeral 1.
22-32-109, 1, N, 2, A, paren on all those. 22-32-109, paren 1, paren N, paren 2, paren B, 22-32-109, paren 1, paren AA, 22-32-119, 22-63-201, 22-63-202, 22-63-203, and 22-63-206 on behalf of Flagstaff Academy.
that's a proper motion. Do I have a second? I hope.
Yes, second.
Thank you. Would you call the roll, please?
Board Member Durham.
Yes.
Board Member Flores.
Yes.
Board Member Goff.
Yes.
Board Member McClellan.
Yes.
Board Member Shuffle, Rankin.
Yes.
Board Member Shuffle.
Yes.
Board Member Schroeder.
Yes.
Thank you, that
Thank
passes
you.
unanimously.
Nice work, Mr. Costa. We are back on
Under the-
schedule.
Minutes to
Good job.
Okay, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay. An executive session has been noticed for today's state board meeting in conformance with 24-6-4023A Roman numeral CRS to receive legal advice on specific legal questions pursuant to 24-6-4023A Roman numeral 2 CRS and matters required to be kept confidential by federal law or rules or state statutes pursuant to 24-6-4023A Roman numeral 3 CRS.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to go into exec session? Second?
I thought we were going to go for a walk.
Second? Thank you. All right, we are now in executive session.